I never imagined my sister's baby shower would become the day I nearly lost both my life and my unborn child. The living room was decorated in soft pastels balloons with tiny ribbons floated near the ceiling, and a table covered with cupcakes and finger sandwiches stood at the center. Family members were chatting, laughing, taking photos of Olivia as she opened presents wrapped in glittering paper. I sat on the side sofa, my 6 months pregnant belly making it hard to find a comfortable position, but I forced myself to smile. Olivia had insisted that I attend. She said it would mean a lot to her if I was there, even though our relationship had always been tense. She was glowing in her fitted blue dress, standing tall as the perfect hostess, while I was quietly trying to ignore the stabbing headache that had been bothering me since morning. At first, it felt like nothing unusual, just the kind of pressure pregnant women sometimes get, but within an hour, it became something else. The room started to blur at the edges, voices grew muffled, and suddenly my right hand trembled uncontrollably. My heart raced with panic because I knew something was terribly wrong. I whispered to my husband, Mark, who was sitting beside me scrolling on his phone. "Mark, something is not right. I cannot feel my arm." He looked at me startled, but before he could react, Olivia walked past carrying a tray of drinks. I reached for her sleeve, desperate for help. "Olivia, I need an ambulance. Please." She leaned down, her perfect smile still plastered on her face for the watching guests, and whispered sharply into my ear. "Don't call 911. You are not dying, Emma. Stop trying to take my spotlight." My stomach dropped. For a second, I could not believe what I had just heard. This was not teasing. This was cruel calculation. I tried to speak again, but my words slurred and came out broken. A cousin nearby chuckled awkwardly, thinking maybe I had joked. My head spun, the lights overhead seemed to sway, and I clutched the edge of the couch. "Mark, please, please call," I begged, but Mark froze under the glare of Olivia, who shook her head slightly at him, the unspoken order clear. In that moment, I felt utterly alone, betrayed not just by my sister, but by my own husband's hesitation. My vision darkened as if someone had drawn heavy curtains across my eyes. I heard Olivia's voice, sweet for the guests, poisonous for me. She always does this, always making drama. Just let her rest. The party should not be ruined because of her. The laughter around me continued, paper wrapping crinkled as Olivia resumed opening gifts, and I sank sideways on the sofa, my body no longer obeying me. I thought of my baby, the tiny kicks I had felt that morning, the heartbeat I had listened to at the last doctor's visit. Was this how it would end, both of us fading away while everyone ignored me? The terror was unbearable. My chest tightened. I tried to scream, but no sound came out, only a rasp that no one paid attention to. My sister's perfume lingered in the air, the cloying sweetness making me nauseous. The last clear thing I saw was Olivia smiling for a camera, holding up a baby blanket while I lay collapsing just a few feet away. My mother Carol's voice drifted over dismissive as though from another world. "She exaggerates everything. Give her some water later. She will be fine." Rage and helplessness surged inside me, colliding with the blackness that swallowed my mind. I felt my baby twist sharply inside me, then everything went silent. That was the moment I realized family could be the cruelest enemy. The people who should have rushed to save me instead turned their faces away. I lost consciousness in the middle of cheerful laughter and clinking glasses, my sister whispering poison in my ear, and the terrifying thought echoing in my fading mind. If they refused to call for help, who would save me? Who would save my child? My name is Emma Wilson, and I am 32 years old. Until that day at my sister's baby shower, I believed my life, though imperfect, was mostly stable and headed towards something brighter with the child I carried. I lived in a modest house in Ohio with my husband, Mark. We had been married for 6 years, not without disagreements, but always with the hope that we were building a family of our own. I worked as a freelance editor for small publishing firms, which allowed me to stay at home most days. Mark was an accountant, quiet and gentle, though sometimes too eager to please others, especially my family. I grew up with my mother, Carol, and my older sister, Olivia. Our father died when we were young, and from that moment, the imbalance in our family took root. Olivia was the firstborn, the golden child in my mother's eyes, the one who seemed destined for everything successful and beautiful. I was the quiet one the shadow always compared and always found lacking. From childhood, Olivia knew how to manipulate. She would break something in the house and point at me, and my mother would believe her instantly. She would mock me for being shy in school, for not having as many friends, for reading too much instead of being outgoing. Carol would only shake her head and say that Olivia was right, that I needed to be more like my sister. That pattern never changed. Olivia grew up to be glamorous, married a wealthy man, and was celebrated in our town for her beauty and her social grace. I took a quieter path, choosing Mark, who was kind if not ambitious, building a modest life filled with books rather than money. To my mother, this was proof that Olivia had triumphed and I had failed. When I announced my pregnancy, my mother barely reacted while Olivia smirked, as if my news were nothing compared to her constant stream of accomplishments. I should have been used to this dynamic, but being pregnant made me hope perhaps things would soften, that family would rally around me. Instead, the old rivalries only sharpened. Olivia began hinting that my baby shower would never be as splendid as hers, that my child would always be in the shadow of hers. My mother chuckled at these comments as though they were harmless jokes, but each one pierced me deeper. Mark noticed sometimes, yet rarely spoke up, worried about causing more tension. He would hold my hand afterward and whisper that I should ignore them. But ignoring cruelty does not erase it. In the weeks before Olivia's shower, she sent me a message that made me pause. She wrote, "Try not to collapse at my party, Emma. It is supposed to be my day, not yours." I had laughed nervously when I first read it, wondering if it was a joke, but a chill ran through me. That message echoed in my mind later when my body betrayed me on her special day. My pregnancy until then had been challenging but not life-threatening. I experienced morning sickness in the first trimester, fatigue that lingered into the second, and swelling in my ankles. Doctors assured me it was normal. They did mention my blood pressure was on the higher side, and they told me to rest more, but I did not feel alarmed. I still edited manuscripts, still cooked meals, still prepared the nursery with Mark. We painted the small room yellow, set up a crib, and talked late into the night about names. These were moments of genuine happiness that carried me through the weight of family tension. My sister never congratulated me sincerely. At a family dinner, she remarked that my belly looked too big too soon and asked if I had been overeating. My mother laughed and added that I was always dramatic about my health, always complaining about headaches or stomach aches that no one else believed. Mark squeezed my hand under the table and said nothing. That silence grew into a wedge between us. I wanted him to defend me, but he feared confrontation. I began to see how easily Olivia and my mother could twist his loyalty, how quickly he doubted my words if they contradicted theirs. Still, I tried to believe things would be fine. I thought blood ties meant something. I thought that despite all the sharp words and favoritism in a real crisis, family would protect me. I was wrong. The baby shower Olivia planned was lavish. Guests filled the living room, gifts piled high, a photographer capturing every smile. I walked in with Mark, my back aching, my feet swollen, but I told myself I was happy to celebrate my sister's milestone. She greeted me with air kisses, her eyes scanning my belly like it was a threat. My mother followed close behind her, barely acknowledging me, already absorbed in organizing food and drinks. I sat quietly watching Olivia soak in the admiration. She looked radiant, but beneath her smile, I sensed something sharper, a need to control the room, to remind me of my place. That introduction to the day was like so many moments in my life, overshadowed, dismissed, tolerated, but never cherished. It was the foundation that made what happened next even more devastating. For when the stroke struck and I collapsed, their true feelings were exposed without disguise. And in that moment, I finally understood how dangerous it was to trust people who only ever wished to silence me. Looking back now, I realize the seeds of that terrible day had been planted years before, watered by jealousy and favoritism, until they grew into something poisonous. Olivia had always needed to be the center of attention. When we were children, she was praised for her beauty, for her charm, for the way she could light up a room. I was praised only for being quiet, for not causing trouble, which in my family was just another way of saying invisible. I remember once when I was 10 and Olivia was 13. She had borrowed my sweater without asking and stained it with juice. When my mother saw the mess, Olivia quickly pointed to me and said I had spilled the drink. My mother did not even question her. She shook her head and scolded me for being careless. I cried that night, but Olivia only laughed and told me that if I was smarter, I would have blamed her first. That pattern never stopped. Years later, during Olivia's wedding preparations, I was asked to be her maid of honor. I wanted to do everything right, but on the morning of the wedding, her gown had a tear in the hem. I had nothing to do with it, but Olivia told everyone I must have handled it wrong. She accused me in front of relatives, and my mother rushed to comfort her, telling her it was a shame to have such an irresponsible sister. I stood in the corner mortified, certain the guests believed her. Those memories clung to me like shadows I could not shake. Mark, who had been dating me then, tried to reassure me. He said Olivia was just stressed and that I should let it go. Even back then, he could not see how deep her cruelty ran. After Mark and I married, the tension only deepened. Every family gathering ended with Olivia mocking my cooking or my clothes while my mother sighed and said she only meant to help me improve. Mark, desperate to keep peace, would urge me not to respond. He told me that arguing would only make me look defensive, so I swallowed my anger, but resentment grew like a stone in my chest. When I became pregnant, I hoped it might shift the balance. I thought maybe Olivia would soften when she saw me vulnerable, that my mother would treat me with more respect when she realized I was carrying her grandchild. For a brief moment, I thought I was right. Olivia sent me a message saying congratulations. My mother asked how I was feeling, but within days, the old cruelty returned. Olivia began comparing our pregnancies as if they were competitions. She bragged about how energetic she had been when she was pregnant, how she had never needed to rest, how she had worked until the very last week. My mother nodded approvingly and said, perhaps I should be more like Olivia. When I complained about nausea, Olivia rolled her eyes. When I mentioned my blood pressure being high, she told me I was too dramatic. Even Mark began repeating their words sometimes. He would say maybe I was worrying too much. Maybe I did need to toughen up. He did not mean to hurt me, but every word chipped away at my trust. Then came the invitations for Olivia's baby shower. She posted on social media about her plans, the decorations, the guest list. I waited for my invitation to arrive, but it never did. When I asked my mother about it, she shrugged and said maybe Olivia assumed I would be too tired to come. My chest tightened. I confronted Olivia gently through a text asking if she had forgotten me. She replied that of course I could come, she just did not want me to overexert myself. But the truth was clear, she had wanted me excluded, wanted the spotlight solely on her. I went anyway because Mark insisted it would look bad if I stayed away. He said I should show support that it was just one afternoon. I agreed, but unease grew inside me. The night before the party, I found myself remembering all the times Olivia had humiliated me. The torn wedding gown, the sweater incident, the endless criticism. I thought about my mother, always siding with her, always seeing me as second best. Even my husband, the man who promised to protect me, had started to echo their doubts. It was as though Olivia had trained us all to dance to her tune. She thrived on control, and I had been conditioned to give in. That was the true seed of conflict. It was not just jealousy. It was the years of being silenced, dismissed, and overshadowed. And in the weeks leading to her baby shower, those seeds began to sprout again. She joked with friends that I might fake an illness to steal attention. My mother laughed with her. Mark told me I should not take it so seriously. I wanted to believe it was only talk, but deep down I feared something darker. That fear was confirmed when Olivia leaned close at the shower and whispered those words that still echo in my mind. Don't call 911. It was not a spur-of-the-moment cruelty. It was the culmination of years of contempt, the bloom of the poisonous seeds planted long ago. The baby shower should have been a celebration, a moment where sisters stood together, where family laughed and cheered and offered blessings for the new life growing inside me. Instead, it became the stage where the hostility that had always simmered beneath the surface boiled over. From the moment Mark and I arrived, Olivia was determined to remind me whose party it was. She welcomed other guests with warmth and posed for photos, but when she turned to me, her smile sharpened into something thin and mocking. She glanced at my swollen ankles and whispered just loud enough for others nearby to hear. You really let yourself go, Emma. Pregnancy is not an excuse to look like you rolled out of bed. A ripple of awkward laughter followed, and I felt the heat rise to my cheeks. I forced myself to sit quietly, determined not to ruin the day. but inside, anger began to stir. My mother, Carol, swooped in to support Olivia, adding, Olivia worked full-time until the day before her delivery. She never made such a fuss. Mark shifted uncomfortably beside me but said nothing. That silence was worse than their words. I wanted him to stand to tell them I was not weak, that pregnancy was not a contest, but instead, he stared at his phone pretending not to hear. The guests settled in as Olivia opened her gifts one by one, holding each item high for applause. Every time I tried to join in the clapping, she shot me a glance as if daring me to draw attention. I could feel my head pounding harder, the pressure building behind my eyes. I told myself it was stress, but deep down, I knew my body was beginning to betray me. After an hour, the dizziness became stronger. I tried to drink some water, but my hand trembled and the glass rattled against my teeth. Sarah, my old college friend who had come along, noticed and asked if I was okay. Before I could answer, Olivia cut in with a bright voice. She is fine. Emma loves to exaggerate her little ailments. She is just jealous because today is not about her. More laughter, more whispers, and my chest tightened with humiliation. I excused myself and went to the bathroom, clutching the walls as the hallway spun around me. Staring into the mirror, I saw my face pale, one side drooping slightly. Terror surged inside me. I splashed cold water and whispered to myself to stay calm, to breathe, to not collapse here alone. I returned to the living room, hoping Mark would notice my distress, but he barely looked up from his phone. I leaned close and whispered, Mark, I need to leave. I do not feel right. He sighed, his eyes flicking to Olivia, who was watching us with narrowed eyes. We cannot leave now, Emma. They have not even cut the cake. I wanted to scream, but my words slurred, betraying me. Olivia smirked and announced loudly, Do not mind, Emma. She always thinks she is dying of something. The room chuckled, and I felt as if the floor itself mocked me. I sank back onto the sofa, trying to hold myself together. The dizziness grew worse, black spots dancing before my eyes. I grabbed Mark's arm, desperately whispering, Please, call 911. Something is wrong. He froze. In that moment, Olivia drifted by, leaned down, and hissed in my ear. Don't you dare ruin my day. No ambulance. No scene. Just sit quietly and stop pretending. My heart stopped. I looked into her cold eyes and realized she meant it. She would rather see me suffer than share the spotlight. My mother joined us, frowning at my pale face. What now, Emma? Always something with you. Just rest a bit. You cannot make everything about yourself. My body swayed, my head heavy. I tried to rise, but my legs buckled and I collapsed back onto the couch. Guests gasped, but no one moved. Olivia waved her hand and laughed. See, drama queen. She will be fine in a minute. That was the moment I felt my arm go completely numb. Panic exploded inside me. I thought of the baby kicking inside me, helpless as I was. I tried to cry out, but my voice came in broken fragments. Sarah rushed over, kneeling by me. Emma, you do not look fine. We need help. Olivia placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder and whispered sharply, Mind your own business. She is exaggerating. Do not encourage her. Sarah pulled back, torn between the hostility in Olivia's eyes and the desperation in mine. Mark finally put his phone down, looking genuinely frightened, but Olivia shook her head and said sweetly, She only wants attention, brother. If you call 911, everyone will think she ruined the shower on purpose. Mark hesitated, paralyzed between loyalty to his wife and obedience to my sister. My vision blurred completely, the voices fading into echoes. I heard my mother's cold words. Let her rest. She will be fine. The betrayal was total, a cage of indifference locking around me. My body sagged, sliding sideways, the sounds of laughter and camera clicks echoing in my fading mind. I thought of the nursery painted yellow, the tiny crib waiting the names Mark and I had whispered in the dark. I thought of a future that might end here because no one would lift a finger. The fear was unbearable. My last clear memory was of Sarah's face hovering above me, eyes wide with shock before darkness swallowed everything. That was how the escalation climaxed, not with shouting or violence, but with a silence that cut deeper than any blade. My family chose to ignore me, to pretend I was nothing more than a nuisance, and in doing so, they revealed the truth I had always feared. To them, my life was expendable if it threatened Olivia's spotlight. The betrayal was complete, and as consciousness slipped away, I realized that the danger did not come from strangers, but from the very people who should have loved me most. When I opened my eyes again, the world was fragmented shapes and voices swimming around me like I was underwater. My body felt foreign, heavy, and unresponsive, as if part of me had been cut away. At first, I did not know where I was until I saw the white ceiling tiles and smelled antiseptic. The hospital. My throat ached. My lips cracked, and when I tried to speak, no sound came out. Panic flared, but then I saw Sarah sitting beside the bed, her eyes red from crying. She grabbed my hand the moment I stirred and whispered, "Emma, you are safe. You are in the hospital. They are taking care of you." I wanted to ask about the baby, but my words slurred. Sarah leaned closer. "The baby is okay. They checked. You are stable now." Relief flooded me, hot tears spilling from my eyes. But then the memory of Olivia's whisper slammed back into me. "Don't call 911. Rage rose sharper than fear. Sarah must have read my expression because she whispered, "I am so sorry. I could not watch them ignore you. I called the ambulance. Olivia tried to stop me. Your mom even yelled at me, but I told them if they touched me, I would scream. The paramedics came, and they almost refused to let them in at first. Can you believe that? They argued while you were collapsing. I thought you would die right there." Her voice broke, and I realized the depth of her courage. Without Sarah, I might have been gone. A doctor entered then, introducing himself as Dr. Patel. He explained gently that I had suffered a stroke, likely triggered by high blood pressure and stress. He said it was fortunate someone had acted quickly because every minute mattered. He reassured me the baby's heartbeat was strong, but warned that I needed strict monitoring. His words settled heavily in me. I had nearly lost everything because my family cared more about appearances than my life. When Mark entered the room a little later, his face was pale, his eyes darting. He took my hand, but guilt radiated from him. "Emma," he whispered, "I am so sorry. I should have done something." My heart twisted. This was the man who had promised to protect me, yet he had sat frozen while my sister silenced him. I turned away, unable to look at him. Sarah filled the silence. "The doctor said if I had not called, Emma might not have made it. You should thank God she is alive." Mark nodded, tears forming, but I wondered if his remorse was enough to erase the image of him sitting quietly while my body crumpled. The turning point came not only from my survival, but from what Sarah did next. She had recorded everything. While Olivia laughed and dismissed me while my mother muttered that I was fine, Sarah had her phone on. She had video of me slurring, collapsing, begging for help, and of Olivia whispering in my ear with venom. She showed me a clip, and my chest clenched. There it was, undeniable. Olivia leaning down, her lips forming the words, "Don't call 911. My mother's cold voice insisting, "She will be fine." The guests chuckling nervously in the background. It was all captured. I stared at the screen, horrified, yet relieved. For years, Olivia and my mother twisted truth into lies, convincing everyone I was weak, dramatic, unworthy of belief. Now I had proof that my suffering was real, proof that their cruelty was not imagined, proof that they had nearly cost me my life. Sarah squeezed my hand and said, "You do not have to hide anymore, Emma. They cannot erase this. The world deserves to know." At first, I was terrified of the idea. Exposing them publicly meant inviting gossip, shame, backlash. But then, I thought of my unborn child. Did I want to raise a baby in a world where their mother's pain was silenced? Did I want to continue being the quiet one, the invisible shadow to Olivia's brilliance? No. Something hardened inside me. This was not just about revenge. It was about survival, about reclaiming my voice after years of being drowned out. Mark pleaded softly, "Maybe we should just keep it within the family." They did not mean it. His words cut like knives. Even now, he wanted to protect them. I turned to him, my voice trembling but firm. "They left me to die. They chose Olivia's image over my life. How can you say they did not mean it?" He had no answer. Dr. Patel returned to check my vitals, and he confirmed again how close I had been to death. If emergency services had been delayed even 10 more minutes, he said we might be having a very different conversation right now. That was the final push I needed. I looked at Sarah at the phone in her hand at the evidence that could no longer be denied. "We will not hide it," I whispered. "We will show everyone." Sarah nodded with fierce determination. Over the next days, as I recovered in the hospital, Sarah helped me organize the footage, preparing to release it online. She told me she was willing to take the blame if backlash came, but I shook my head. "No," I said, "this is my story. I will not be silent anymore." Each time I replayed the clip of Olivia's whisper of my mother's dismissal of the laughter echoing around me, my resolve deepened. The turning point was not simply surviving the stroke. It was choosing to transform their cruelty into their downfall. For the first time in my life, I felt a spark of power. The girl who had been blamed for torn dresses and broken glasses was gone. In her place was a woman who had looked death in the eye and decided she would not be erased. My body was weak, my speech still slurred, but inside a fire burned steady. This was the moment the story shifted. No longer was I the victim of Olivia's games. From now on, I would write the ending myself. The day I left the hospital, the air felt sharper, cleaner, as if the world itself had shifted while I lay between life and death. Sarah walked beside me, her phone gripped tightly in her pocket, carrying the truth like a weapon. Mark pushed my wheelchair silently, his face pale with guilt, but my focus was fixed on what was ahead. The baby shower aftermath had already begun spreading whispers through town. Guests had seen me collapse, had seen Olivia brush it off, but gossip was fragile, easily dismissed. The footage Sarah carried was not gossip. It was evidence, a blade that could cut through every lie Olivia and my mother had ever spun. That night, lying in my bed at home, I replayed the video again and again. Each time I heard Olivia's hiss, "Don't call 911, rage," coiled tighter in my chest. Each time I heard my mother's dismissive, "She will be fine," the rage sharpened. I thought of my unborn child, how close they had come to losing their mother before they even entered the world, and I knew I could not stay silent. Sarah sat across from me, her eyes burning with loyalty. "Emma," she said, "when you are ready, we post it. People need to see what they did. They will not be able to hide." My hands trembled, but not with fear. With resolve. "Tomorrow," I whispered. The next morning, Sarah uploaded the footage. Within hours, it spread like wildfire across Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, shared by neighbors, co-workers, even strangers. The comments poured in, outrage exploding. People who had always admired Olivia's charm now saw her venom exposed. "How could a sister do that?" wrote one commenter. "This is attempted murder," wrote another. My mother's cold dismissal drew equal fury. What kind of mother ignores her daughter's medical emergency? The tide turned swiftly. By evening, local reporters called asking for interviews. Sarah fielded them for me while I rested, but the weight of it filled the air. Mark paced the living room, torn between relief that I had survived and dread that his family's name was now tied to scandal. "Emma," he pleaded, "maybe you should take it down. It is destroying them." His words made my blood boil. "They tried to destroy me," I snapped. "Why should I protect them now?" He had no answer. That weekend, Olivia attempted damage control. She posted a long Facebook status claiming the video was taken out of context, that she had been joking, that she loved me dearly. But the world was not fooled. The footage showed my slurred speech, my collapse, her smirk. Her words rang hollow. Then came the interviews. Sarah arranged for me to speak to a local news anchor from my living room. I sat upright, my voice still weak but steady. I told the story plainly, how I collapsed, how my sister whispered for silence, how my mother told guests to ignore me, how only Sarah saved me. The anchor looked horrified. The segment aired that evening and the impact was immediate. Messages flooded in from women across the country, many older, many who had endured years of family cruelty, writing to say, "I see myself in you. Thank you for speaking." Their voices built a chorus of support that drowned out Olivia's attempts at denial. The climax reached its peak when the hospital confirmed my diagnosis publicly. The doctor stated clearly that immediate medical attention had been required, that delay could have been fatal. Suddenly, it was not just family drama, it was negligence with life or death consequences. People began demanding legal action. Sarah urged me to press charges, and though I hesitated because pressing charges against family felt unthinkable, I remembered the baby inside me. I remembered the floor, spinning the silence of my mother, the smirk of Olivia. Yes, it was unthinkable. And yet it was necessary. The night before I signed the legal complaint, Mark broke down. He knelt beside me, tears streaming, begging me not to go through with it. "They are my family," he cried. "I know what they did was wrong, but jail will ruin them." I stared at him, feeling my heart crack. "And what about me?" I asked. "What about your wife, your child? Do we not matter?" He buried his face in his hands. That was the moment I realized our marriage might not survive. The next morning, I filed the complaint with Sarah by my side. The footage became evidence the doctors provided testimony, and soon Olivia and my mother found themselves under investigation. Olivia tried to intimidate me, sending messages through relatives threatening that if I went forward, I would be ostracized forever. I ignored her. The court of public opinion had already judged her, and soon the legal court would follow. During the preliminary hearing, the footage played on a large screen. I sat there trembling as the words filled the courtroom, echoing, "Don't call 911." Olivia's face blanched as the judge frowned deeply. My mother sat stone-faced, refusing to look at me. Sarah squeezed my hand, tightly whispering, "They cannot erase it anymore." The hearing ended with the judge remarking that the case showed clear evidence of reckless endangerment and possibly criminal negligence. Olivia screamed at reporters outside, accusing me of betrayal, but no one believed her. The climax of my journey had arrived after years of being invisible. I was now undeniable. My voice was on every television, my face in every article. I was no longer the sister in the shadows. I was the woman who survived, who fought back, who refused to be erased. And as I returned home that night, exhausted but alive, I felt the baby stir inside me, strong and steady, as if reminding me that this fight was not just mine. It was for the future, for a life that deserved better than silence and cruelty. The climax was brutal, tearing apart everything I thought family meant, but it was also liberating. The chains that bound me to Olivia's control shattered, and though the road ahead was uncertain, one truth stood firm: I had faced death and betrayal and had chosen to rise. In the weeks that followed the hearing, the fallout rippled through every corner of my life. The phone rang constantly, relatives calling not to check on my health, but to berate me for dragging family business into the open. "Emma, you should be ashamed," one aunt hissed. "Blood is blood. You don't ruin your sister like this." I listened quietly before hanging up. For the first time in my life, I did not argue or cry. I simply refused to engage. My silence unsettled them more than shouting ever could. Olivia, once the golden child, found doors slamming in her face. Friends who had adored her charm now avoided her. Employers whispered. Even at the grocery store, people turned away, unwilling to be associated with someone who told guests to ignore a woman having a stroke. She lashed out on social media, accusing me of editing the footage, but each post drew only ridicule. My mother retreated into silence, refusing to take my calls. When she finally did send a message, it contained only 6 words. "You've destroyed this family for good." I stared at that message for a long time before deleting it. For years, her approval had been my compass, but now I realized it had only ever led me deeper into darkness. Mark and I grew more distant with each passing day. He tried to straddle both sides, comforting me at night, then texting Olivia during the day to check on her. One evening, I confronted him, asking whose side he was truly on. He looked at me with tears in his eyes and whispered, "I just want peace." But peace built on silence was no peace at all. Our home became a quiet battlefield, yet through the cracks of that battlefield came small rays of strength. Neighbors dropped off meals. Women from the community center sent letters thanking me for speaking out. One older woman, Margaret, wrote, "I kept quiet when my sister hurt me and my children suffered for it. You are braver than I was." Her words made me cry, but also gave me resolve. The fallout was not only destruction, it was also a strange kind of rebuilding. At doctor's appointments, the nurses treated me with extra care, whispering that they had seen my story on TV. Strangers stopped me in parking lots to say, "You did the right thing." It was surreal to go from invisible to recognized, from silenced to validated. But every validation carried the reminder of the cost. My family, the people who should have cherished me, were gone. They had chosen Olivia's pride over my life, and now they lived with the consequences. Olivia's baby shower, once meant to be her crowning moment, became infamous in town lore. People referred to it in hushed tones, calling it the day the mask slipped. For me, that label carried both grief and liberation. I had lost a sister, but perhaps I had never truly had one. The real heartbreak was my mother. She refused to meet my eyes, even when we crossed paths at the courthouse. She sat, rigid lips pressed tight, as though I had betrayed her rather than the other way around. That betrayal cut deeper than Olivia's whisper ever could. Because a mother is supposed to protect, to love without condition. Yet when I needed her most, she chose silence. That silence echoed louder than any scream, and still, amidst the wreckage, life pushed forward. The baby grew inside me, kicking stronger each week, a steady reminder that the future mattered more than the past. Sarah remained my anchor, visiting daily, helping with meals, reminding me that not all family is defined by blood. "You are not alone," she told me over and over until I began to believe it. The fallout was messy, filled with pain, but it also cleared the ground. For the first time in decades, I could see a path that belonged to me, not to Olivia, not to my mother, not to the family that had kept me small. It was terrifying standing in that clearing with no familiar guideposts, but it was also exhilarating, because now every step forward would be mine. The day of final resolution came quietly, not with shouting or spectacle, but with the steady certainty of a decision long in the making. I sat on the porch, the autumn sun warming my skin, one hand resting on my swollen belly, the other holding Sarah's phone. On the screen was a draft of a statement I had written for the world to see, not angry but firm, not bitter but unflinching. It was time to end the cycle of silence that had kept me captive for so long. The fallout had burned bridges, but it had also revealed a truth: those bridges were never safe to walk on in the first place. Sarah sat beside me, nodding as she read my words. "This is your voice, Emma," she said. "Not Olivia's, not your mother's. Yours. And it is strong." I took a deep breath and hit post. Within minutes, the message spread my words, reaching far beyond our small town. I wrote that I had survived a stroke not only because of medical care, but because I refused to be silenced anymore. I wrote that family loyalty should never be used as a weapon to cover cruelty. I wrote that love must be proven in action, not demanded in words. And I ended with this: to anyone living in the shadows of toxic family control, your life matters. Do not wait for permission to save yourself. The comments flooded in, thousands of them, people sharing their own scars, their own betrayals, their own choices to finally break free. For the first time in years, I felt connected not through shame, but through shared strength. Olivia called that evening, her voice frantic, but I let it go to voicemail. My mother sent a final message saying she would never forgive me. I stared at it for a long time and then pressed delete. Forgiveness, I realized, was not something I needed from her. It was something I was finally granting myself. The resolution was not about winning in court or destroying reputations. It was about choosing myself, choosing my child, choosing a life built on truth rather than denial. Mark came home late that night, his shoulders slumped, his eyes tired. He looked at me and said softly, "I do not know if I can stand against them, Emma. They are my family." My heart ached, but I answered with the clarity I had earned. "Then you must decide, Mark, because I will not return to silence. Not for them, not for you, not for anyone." His silence told me more than words. Perhaps our marriage would not survive, but I no longer feared that possibility. I had already survived the worst. In the weeks that followed, I prepared for motherhood with Sarah by my side. We painted the nursery, folded tiny clothes, and each kick of the baby reminded me why I had fought so hard. The stroke had nearly stolen me, but it had also given me the vision to see that life is too fragile to waste on people who rejoice in your suffering. On the morning of my child's birth, I held Sarah's hand in the delivery room. As my baby's cry filled the air, I felt a wave of fierce joy. Looking into my child's eyes, I whispered, "You will never doubt that you are loved. You will never be silenced." In that moment, the resolution crystallized. I was no longer the sister who was told she was weak, no longer the daughter dismissed by her mother, no longer the woman who collapsed on a floor while others laughed. I was a survivor, a mother, a woman who chose truth over silence. And though the scars of betrayal would always remain, they would not define me. My story was no longer theirs to twist. It was mine to tell, and I would tell it with strength, with clarity, with love. That was the truest resolution of all. The consequences did not come all at once like a storm, but slowly, inevitably, like the tide rising higher each day until it swallowed everything Olivia and my mother had built. Olivia was the first to crumble. Her attempt to salvage her reputation through social media collapsed when parents in her neighborhood stopped inviting her child to playdates, whispering about the video that still lived online, impossible to erase. The boutique where she had worked part-time quietly let her go, citing the distraction of recent events. She raged publicly, claiming she was the real victim, but no one listened. Eventually, she disappeared from social circles entirely, her once polished charm exposed as brittle glass. My mother Carol fared no better. Friends who had admired her poised hosting and her veneer of strength began to avoid her. At church, once her kingdom people turned their faces away, unwilling to condone a mother who dismissed her daughter's medical emergency. She sat in the pew, alone, her posture still rigid, but the silence around her was louder than any accusation. It was not jail that punished her. It was irrelevance, the shattering of the respect she had spent decades cultivating. Mark lived his own consequence, one that hurt me more deeply than I expected. His refusal to take a firm stand eroded the fragile threads between us until there was nothing left to hold. One evening, long after the baby was born, we sat in the quiet of the nursery. He looked at me with tears in his eyes and whispered, "I cannot be what you need, Emma." I felt the sting of grief, but also the clarity of truth. I told him softly, "Then you must go." He left the next morning, and though my heart ached, the air in the house felt lighter without the constant shadow of divided loyalties. My consequence was different. I gained freedom, but also solitude. The holidays were quiet, no bustling dinners, no crowded tables. Yet in that quiet, I discovered peace. Sarah and I built new traditions, pumpkin carving with neighbors, small dinners filled with laughter, late-night conversations that healed the cracks left by years of betrayal. The biggest consequence of all was the birth of my child. Holding my baby each night reminded me of why I had endured everything. I promised that this child would never be silenced, never be told their pain was inconvenient. That promise became my compass. The wider community drew lessons too. Local papers continued to reference the case as an example of how family loyalty can be weaponized. Schools and community centers invited me to speak about recognizing toxic control and the courage to resist it. I stood before rooms of strangers, my voice steady, my story laid bare, and saw in their eyes the reflection of countless hidden wounds. My story had become more than mine. It was a warning, a spark for others to break free. Olivia's consequence was isolation. My mother's was disgrace. Mark's was loss, but mine was transformation. I walked through fire and came out scarred, yet unbroken, carrying a life that symbolized resilience. The world now knew what they had done, and though justice in the courtroom was slow, justice in the court of human hearts had already been delivered. The true consequence was irreversible. They could never again control the narrative, never again erase me. My voice had become permanent, etched into the memory of everyone who heard the whisper, "Don't call 911." Followed by the truth that I had survived anyway. That whisper was their downfall, but my refusal to be silenced was my redemption. Years later, when I look back on that day at Olivia's baby shower, the memory is no longer only pain, but also a reminder of the moment I finally chose myself. The whisper that was meant to end me became the spark that saved me. My child, now old enough to run through the yard with laughter spilling into the air, knows nothing of the cruelty that once defined my family. They only know a mother who kneels to tie their shoes, who listens when they cry, who tells them that their feelings matter. Sometimes when I tuck them into bed, I think about how different my life could have been if I had stayed silent, if I had allowed Olivia's voice and my mother's judgment to remain louder than my own. The thought chills me, but it also strengthens my resolve never to return to that silence. Sarah is still by my side, the sister I found when my own turned against me. Together, we have built a circle of chosen family neighbors, friends, women from the community center who became sisters in survival. Holidays are no longer lonely. They are filled with genuine laughter, with stories told without fear of ridicule, with love that is steady and real. Olivia and my mother remain absent from my life. I do not know where Olivia lives now, or whether she still tries to convince others she was wronged. I no longer care. My mother has never apologized, never reached out, but I have learned that closure does not require her permission. Closure came the day I realized that forgiveness was not about excusing them, but about freeing myself. Mark and I divorced quietly without hatred, only a recognition that love cannot survive in the soil of divided loyalties. I grieved, but I also grew. The life I have now is not the one I once imagined, but it is stronger, truer, and mine alone. Sometimes people still approach me, strangers who recognize me from the story that once spread across headlines. They thank me for speaking when I had every reason to remain silent. They tell me they left toxic marriages, stood up to controlling parents, broke patterns of violence because they saw that survival was possible. Each time I hear those words, I feel a swell of gratitude. What began as my private hell became a beacon for others. That is the final epilogue of my story, not just survival, but transformation. The girl who grew up in her sister's shadow, who collapsed on a floor while family turned away, has become a woman who stands in her own light. I no longer measure my worth by their approval. I measure it by the steady beat of my heart, by the laughter of my child, by the freedom to speak the truth without fear. The epilogue is not about what I lost, but what I gained: a voice, a future, a family of choice, and the unshakable knowledge that I am enough. When I had a stroke at my sister's baby shower and she whispered, "Don't call 911," I thought it was the end. In reality, it was the beginning of the life I was meant to live.